everyone, it's Maki here. Today, I'm going to introduce a mobile suit that appears in the Seed series. It's the GINN ceremonial decoration type. This mobile suit was created by modifying the GINN used by the Zaft military for ceremonial purposes. It was also created as part of a project called MSV. The same project was also carried out for the original 0079. The official name of this project is Mobile Suit Variation. The aim of the project was to design mobile suits that did not appear in the anime series, thus allowing more stories to be created and encouraging fans to expand their imaginations. Mobile suits that were decorated extravagantly for ceremonies also existed in previous MSV projects. The ceremonial decorations in is a similar concept. However, it may also have been a machine that played an important behind-the-scenes role in history. Today, let's take a closer look at the ceremonial decorations in. If you'd like to support me and my friends, please join the 99¢ monthly membership. As a thank you, you'll receive a name badge and comment stamps. Together, let us deliver divine punishment upon the traitors who betrayed us, the coordinators, in pursuit of false peace. Now then, let us begin our report on the research findings. As its name suggests, the ceremonial decorations in is a modified in intended for ceremonial use. However, only its appearance has been altered. No actual modifications have been made. For this reason, its model number is identical to that of the standard in. Its most notable feature is the decoration applied to the surface of its armor. These are similar to the decorations used on the mobile suits of Neo, Zeon in Gundam Unicorn. However, these decorations differ greatly from those used by Neo, Zeon. The Neo Zeon decorations are called engraving. This technique involves carving metal to create uneven surfaces and give the armor a three-dimensional decorative appearance. Zaft developed a new type of paint that uses a special resin. By adjusting the thickness of the paint, the visual texture of the surface could be controlled. As a result, they were able to create the appearance of armor that had received engraving treatment. In other words, the GINN's decorations are not actual engravings. Through clever painting techniques, the appearance of engraved decorations is simply created. This painting method avoids the labor and the expense of physically carving the armor. Many people probably have the impression that Zaft was a powerful military capable of deploying large numbers of new mobile suits into real combat one after another. However, the reality is that they were reducing costs by developing new paint technologies. As I explained earlier, the body of the GINN is identical to the standard version. However, if you look closely, you will notice that the covers for the rear thrusters have an asymmetrical design. No source materials explain the reason for this design change. Given that its actual performance as a mobile suit is identical to the standard GINN, it is likely that the thruster covers were redesigned purely for decorative purposes. The decorative design of the GINN ceremonial decoration was created with visual psychological effects in mind. Military ceremonial decorations are usually designed based on the traditions and history of a nation. However, the France were a brand new nation with no such history. For this reason, the coordinators created a design intended to give viewers a majestic impression. They built their designs based on theory, not tradition. The knowledge and technology of the coordinators were also utilized in the design of its weapons. The standard rifle uses a single solid board of natural oak. Although the official description uses the term natural, it is somewhat misleading. The coordinators used genetic engineering techniques to rapidly cultivate oak trees and grow them to a gigantic size. Boughs were then cut from these giant trees. It may seem strange to call genetically modified trees natural. Could this simply be a typo in the text? Or perhaps it is interesting to interpret it as the coordinators insist on calling it natural because deep down they long for the natural world. Ultimately, how you interpret it is up to you. The sling belt is also made from animal leather. However, giant animals were not created through genetic engineering to obtain the leather. Instead, large sheets of leather were produced using cultivation technology. The rifle itself uses the same internal firing mechanism parts as the standards in machine gun. Consequently, it is structurally capable of loading and firing standard, soft military ammunition. However, the constricted barrel makes it impossible to fire actual bullets. It is strictly a ceremonial weapon intended for firing blanks. Nevertheless, the rifle can fire bullets if the barrel is modified. The rifle is bolt action, meaning it can only fire one shot per reload. Its combat capability would be extremely low in battlefields, where many mobile suits unleash heavy fire with machine guns and similar weapons. Nevertheless, this feature would later cause a minor incident. I will explain this in the final section. The other weapon is a saber. This special weapon is permitted only for commander units. Its blade is made from formed metal, which is created using metallurgical techniques that can only be performed in zero gravity and is coated with metallic resin. It is an extremely lightweight, highly rigid high-quality sword. However, it only meets the quality standards of a metal not intended for combat. It does not have enough strength to withstand real combat. Does anyone remember the role that the ceremonial decoration GINN actually played? Many people will probably recall seeing it being deployed at a soft military base in the opening episode of Sea Destiny. However, once the battle begins, it is only shown being destroyed. Considering everything we have discussed so far, the reason is probably easy to understand. The ceremonial decorations in weapons possess almost no offensive power. It would have been completely powerless against Gundams equipped with valuable fish shift armor. Personally, I would have liked to see a ceremonial decorations in fighting with a sword to protect its comrades, even though it knew its attacks were ineffective. However, given that this was a time of peace rather than war, this is understandable. The soldiers present never imagined that a battle would break out. So, did the ceremonial decorations in ever play an active role anywhere else? The answer can be found in an MSV story. It was during the memorial ceremony at Junior 7. The ceremonial decorations in first mission was to commemorate those who lost their lives in the Bloody Valentine tragedy. Those who designed the ceremonial decorations in believed that its extravagant appearance and thunderous gunfire would captivate the people. However, reality did not align with their expectations. The bell-like sound made when the rifle cartridges struck the ground after being ejected left the strongest impression on people. The sound of operating the rifle's bolt mechanism also remained deeply etched in people's memories. Although the ceremonial decorations in was designed with an obsessive pursuit of majestic visual beauty, it was the sound that remained in people's hearts. Another interesting element of this story is that the detail that the cartridges fell to the ground and produced a bell-like sound Junior 7 had already collapsed, so normal gravity should not have existed there. In the anime series, the scene is also portrayed as taking place in a zero-gravity environment. However, the fact that the cartridges fell to the ground suggests that gravity existed. Could the coordinators have modified the Junior 7 wreckage to generate gravity? Perhaps they installed thrusters and caused it to rotate like a space colony, for example. Considering it this way alters the perception of operation to drop Junior 7, which occurs in Sea Destiny. This incident involved terrorists manipulating Junior 7 and attempting to drop it onto Earth. Some people may find it strange that it was terrorists rather than an official military force that were able to rapidly modify such a gigantic object. But what if Junior 7 had control systems from the beginning? In that case, it becomes possible to imagine that the terrorists modified Junior 7 by making use of these systems. This opens the door to that kind of speculation. Of course, the truth is unknown. This is nothing more than my own personal speculation. How would you interpret the phenomenon of the cartridges falling to the ground during the ceremony at Junior 7? Another incident occurred at Junior 7 too. The ceremonial decoration scene was involved in it, of course. This was the signing ceremony for the Junior's treaty. This took place shortly before the events of Sea Destiny began. The ceremonial decoration scene was deployed by the plant nation during the ceremony. However, one of the scenes assigned to the event went missing. This scene was piloted by a Zaft soldier who opposed the end of the war. He modified the rifle. Since the firing mechanism used the same components as the standard scene, modifying the barrel alone allowed it to fire live ammunition. However, ordinary bullets would not have been sufficiently destructive. Since the rifle required bolt-action reloading after each shot, there would only be one opportunity to attack. Therefore, he prepared special armor-piercing capped, multi-stage explosive rounds. The target was an Earth Alliance warship. These rounds had enough power to penetrate the armored observation windows of our battleship's command bridge. After penetrating the interior, the explosive charge would then detonate, killing those inside. A similar attack method was employed by the anti-ship rifle rounds of the Zoku that appeared in the origin. While the rounds did not have enough power to destroy a warship, they were powerful enough to kill those attending the ceremony. The pilot's goal was to use this attack to reignite a state of war between the Earth Alliance and Zaft. Inside the cockpit, the pilot swore revenge for his fallen comrades and the family pictured beside him. However, just before carrying out the attack, the Zin suddenly twisted its body around. A mobile suit had approached from behind the ceremonial decorations in. Even before the Zin's sensors could detect the enemy, the pilot sensed its approach purely through sharpened instinct. Then the pilot saw it. A blue mobile suit carrying a gigantic sword. On its chest was an emblem designed around the motif of a snake. The pilot instinctively fired the rifle. However, the blue mobile suit had predicted the attack and evaded it completely. The next instant, the gigantic sword sliced through the Zin's cockpit. The giant sword attack struck precisely, hitting only the pilot inside the cockpit. Blood overflowed from the cockpit and drifted out into space. However, the engine and propellant did not explode. The blue mobile suit had defeated the pilot without causing an explosion. Through astonishing skill, it had carried out an incredibly precise attack. This battle was never recorded in history. Both Earth Alliance and front records state that the signing ceremony of the Junius Treaty proceeded without any interference. The ceremonial declarations in attempted to carry out an attack in the shadows of history. It was stopped by a mysterious blue mobile suit. That concludes my research findings. Thank you for watching until the very end. I'll see you again in the next program.